Greetings. Welcome to another installment of Top 1500. Today we're going to handle the part 2, the bottom. Now, this might as well be the instant judgment of a gamer who knows what they like, but not the game itself. We're going to start with number 4 on the BGG rating. Now, these games may not look good, but maybe we want to give them a try. We're going to learn some valuable lessons along the way of today's Top 1500, and let's see if you can figure out why top lists are the way that they are. Let's continue with the first batch. Now, you might already immediately see that Dune Imperium is on there. There's a lot of popular games on here. Lizard Wizard, there's Dice Hospital, there's Century Golem Edition, Catacombs Cubes. There are a lot of games in here, and they are by no means a judgment on whether these games are well designed or not. This is just my own personal view of whether these games are for me or, not so much. So it's very subjective. And one of the things that you're going to immediately see right off the bat is that subjectivity kind of matters, because these games have a rating of 4, but really they should have no reason to have a rating of 4. Ticket to Ride is a very popular family game. There is Fertility, there's Abyss, Space Base, heck, even games like Red Outpost and Longhorn, or Awkward Guests, Cloud City. They surely do not deserve a rating of 4 on anyone's list. So why did I put it on number 4? Well, as we saw in the previous edition of Top 1500, there are a lot of factors that come into play, but my focus is mainly going to be on whether the theme is something that I like, whether the visuals are something that I find, nice to look at, and whether the table presence is there or not. And there could be a lot of games that I actually already exclude from this list simply based on the fact that maybe they're only card games, or maybe they're very abstract games. Pegasus, for instance, looks cute, has good art, but it's not my type of game. My City, for instance, is a legacy game. I love legacy games, but this is a Euro game legacy game, and that wasn't really up my alley, so to speak. There are other games that, I would love to try. Clans of Caledonia, there's Stronghold there. Sushi Go Party I've actually played quite a bit. Why are they still so low then? Surely the game experience is nice and is interesting to engage with, right? I mean, and I'm very much not a fan of Terraforming Mars. You see Ares Expedition is in there, and that just has to do with the theme. I'm not very big on science fiction. I'm more of a fantasy person, but like even here you could see there are some fantasy games in there. Dragons, Witchstone, the recent Foundations of Rome. How do I sound on mythology? I love Aeon Trespass Odyssey, as you could see on my top 10 list of 2022. So why not Foundations of Rome? Well, sometimes these games can also be really crunchy, and complexity matters. Artifacts Inc., I love Ryan Laukat games. But maybe this one was just too small, so size also matters. Camp Pinetop was really, really cute. I actually owned a copy of Black Sonata. That was a fun solo game to do. Kill Dr. Lucky, I've always wanted to try. I've owned a copy of Crossmaster Jr., but it wasn't French. So there's a lot of reasons why I would put a game on my list, higher or lower, depending on my subjective preferences. And I think that goes for a lot of people, gamers who don't do content creation, or just professional reviewers. It really makes no difference. It's really what your subjective tastes are all about. Now, you may see some copies, like Ticket to Ride Europe is on here, for instance. That is by accident. I tried to stick to one name of a game to put on this list and try to capture the entirety of all the editions of that game, but sometimes they slip through. Now, Gollum was a very popular game, for instance. These last 2 years, Dungeon Academy looks like a really fun game. Again, the mixture was not quite there for me personally. And when I say that a lot of these games are personal tastes, I know that I said in the previous part of the top 1500 that I was going to look at games that have just a sort of like a cover. You judge the game by their box cover in a store, for instance. That is not so much the case now. As you can see, like a lot of subjective factors are coming into play here now. And that's just the nature of the game of ranking these games on lists. So yeah, you can't escape, and I can't escape, obviously, the fact that sometimes we don't look at how well a game is designed. I know, for instance, that Rising 5 may have gotten some flack, but Altiplano, for instance, did not. That was considered a really good game. Era, Medieval Age, another good game. Lords of Waterdeep is a positive classic. It put fantasy games on the map with Euro mechanics of worker placements. Hyperborea is a really grand giant game to play. Smash Up is a really popular family game, for instance. And I know like it feels like I'm making a lot of excuses for why these are so low on the list, but trust me, I've thrown all of these games through PubMeeple, compared them to one another, and that's going to actually tap into the second reason why some games, even now looking back at them, may have ranked higher, to be honest, on my list, or maybe lower. Take, for instance, Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. I've always wanted to try the game, but I know nothing about it. Maracaibo is a game that's maybe too complex for me, but I love the Caribbean theme of it. What else do we see? Dice Settlers is something I would try. Pioneer Days, I love the theme of that. Escape Room in a Box is probably not right up my alley, although I do like escape room games. So I guess what I'm saying is sometimes it's just a snapshot moment of how you feel right there and then, and not a general look over a lifespan of a game or indeed yourself. Let's see what else is on the list. I own a copy of Ghosts of the Moor, which is a really fun little game, but I am in the process of doing away with a lot of really small games, trying to focus on the more bigger experiences. Mystery House was actively not so great, so that could justify why it's so low. But again, we're not looking at how well a game is designed. This is purely just a knee-jerk reaction, looking at these games first instance and seeing if they would be up my alley or not. Slide Quest I have a copy of. It's a fun game. Tiny Epic Pirates I have a copy of. But I find that game, despite its pirate theme, which I really, really like, very, very complex. Actually too complex to be called tiny. Epic, though, is probably a good name for it. And then as we approach the end of the number fours, we see Legends Untold, another very complex little dungeon crawler. Kind of a shame, to be honest, because otherwise it would have maybe ranked higher. Yeah, and Tower of Madness, for instance, Cthulhu. I love Cthulhu. The theme really appeals to me. Dracula, maybe not so much. Lost Valley, if it's about exploration. Sometimes it's also about the components that you find in games. They don't make for a really good table presence, which is something that helps the immersion, I find. And so yeah, a lot of dry Euro games automatically rank lower on my list simply because they don't have a great table presence. Although there's a lot of changes coming these last 5 years. Okay, so that takes care of our ranking at four, which doesn't. These games may not look so good, but I would give them a try. Now we're going down to the ranking of three, and these games to me just positively look bad, and I likely am not to play them. There's going to be a lot of games on here that I might give it a try, but more likely I may not. So what are we looking at here? So I see Tikal 2, I see Origin. The art that I like most of a list like that would be something like Wizards Academy or Tikal or actually Origin. Those three games, really jump out to me. Game covers that don't are Hawken, for instance, Raccoon Tycoon, Let's Summon Demons, or Cathedral. These games do not look good to me. Magic the Gathering I've played a long time ago. Why is it so low on the list? I find it outstayed its welcome, to be honest. Card games generally just don't do really well. I need more components. I need standees or miniatures to represent characters. I need tiles or map books to represent locations. Cards are good for events and plot, I find personally. The Search for Planet X is a very well regarded game, as is Gutenberg, but the themes just don't appeal to me. And definitely the same can be said about Power Grid. And the same can be said about Blue Skies, Newton, Herbalism, Decrypto, even, despite being a really good game. Um, I find that these themes are not something that I look forward to doing. It sounds more like work. Talking about work, Gunshot Clever is very just abstract. It's just a dice game. So I'd be more inclined to pick something like Giants or Catacombs, Elysium. I find that theme really does matter for immersion and escapism. Just One is actually a really fun game. That's one that I might actually hold on to, mainly because my family likes it a lot. Monster Crunch, great art. Kushi Express, also good art. Java looks interesting. Temple Run, Aqualin, Thunderstone Quest. But then you get other games that just do not appeal to me. Dinner in Paris, Rise of Augustus, Sherlock 13, Clippers, Civilizations, Smartphone. These are all things that keep me busy in real life, or I'd actually like to do, like Dinner in Paris, but not so much in a game. Let's see, then we have Pan Am. We have Starship Samurai. That looks actually pretty good, as does Fairy Trails. Metallum looks interesting. Dominations. Farm Shop. Yeah, once again, there are a lot of games on this list that are good designs and have a lot of fans. And people would probably look at my list and think, well, come on, you know, a rating of 3, that's totally unjustified, especially if you haven't played the games. But I do think that lists of these kind, regardless whether or not you've played the game, regardless of how much insight you have into the design or how much experience you have with it, they're just so subjective, and in that respect, held on the same regard as someone who just walks into a store and looks at these games. D100 Dungeon, I was kind of disappointed with. The Faceless looks great, but the gameplay is not there. Fleet has pirates, but otherwise the game is not for me. Endeavor, same thing. 5 Minute Mystery, I love 5 Minute Dungeon, but 5 Minute Mystery did nothing for me. Same with Role Player. I like Role Player Adventures, but not Role Player. So yeah, there are a lot of subjective opinions out there, and mine is just adding to them. But I hope that you get a better idea of the type of games that will feature on story tiles. And these games will be very adventurous and have great experiences, but they may not be the best designed or most popular. Popular lists and reviews, I think, come from people who definitely adore the mechanics or the mechanisms of games, and they look at the design and they look how well it's been implemented. Maybe they address the theme, but they don't really look at the story experience. They don't really look at what the narrative may or may not do. And with narrative, by the way, I include art. So Wendigo here has really good art, as does Shadow Kingdoms of Valeria. And like on this list, for instance, Spyfall 2 has great art. So does On the Rocks, Muse, or at Labora, definitely not, nor Merlin. Kremlin, also not a winner. But these games could very well be very fun games to play. But I look at the total package. Game mechanics or mechanisms I kind of take for granted as long as they don't become overwhelmingly complex. I could see on my list, for instance, games like Arena for the Gods. that looks fun, but is it a complex game? Maybe Android is. I don't know. Android, I think, is a card game. So, yeah. A Tale of Pirates, the theme is there, and pirate games tend to be more simple. After Nova, science fiction, they tend to be more complex. But is that true? And now I can hear you thinking, okay, but if I don't know, then why would you put it on the list so low? Again, this is a very quick comparison between two games each and every time, going through 1,500 games on PubMeeple. And as you're going to see as we go down the list, especially in the twos and ones, PubMeeple has an algorithm that categorizes whole lists depending on a single choice that you may have made before. So all the games that came after one particularly poor rated game may be good, but because they follow in that list, they automatically get shoved down the total ranking. I don't know if this makes sense, but we're going to see some games that even I think, well, maybe they should be higher. And what I'm going to do with these ratings is once this top 1500 is done, I'm going to basically delete all the ratings for games that I have actually not played and stick to the games that I have and the games that I want to play, the games that are interesting to me. For instance, Brian Boru. I live in Ireland, and so that appeals to me. Another one is Stone Age or Black Angel. I've heard both good things about those. I love the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, so that could be another one. Amun Ray, I like the Egyptian theme. There's a lot of good stuff. Keyflower does not, Spicy does not, Urbania does not, Bosk does, Tuki does. Okay, we've now captured the number 3 games. Now we're going to go into the number 2 games. And whereas the 3 games may have looked bad and I likely won't play, but there's still a minute chance that I could play them. And again, this is all very subjective and in the moment snapshotty. That's a word. The number 2s, woof, I'll never play that. Well, now we're getting to really the rock bottom of games that have not impressed me and are very unlikely to come to the table if someone else brought them, let alone that I would have any interest in buying them. So let's look at them. There's Keyforge, Age of Ascension. Yeah, very popular game, but Keyforge I have no interest in playing. Forbidden Desert I've actually played, but no interest in playing it again. And then there's Rory Story Cubes that I've actually had a lot of fun with my kid when he was much younger. Now I would not touch them probably even to create stories with. Clip Cut Parks. At one point I was interested in playing it, but now not so much anymore. There's an issue of how much time you have left to spend on games, considering that, I have a day job and a family and all sorts of other things that also take up time. And of course there's space and money involved. So yeah, you got to really be very selective in what you play or not. Like Risk Legacy, the very first Legacy game, I want to say, I have interest maybe in playing that, but then again, it's Risk. I've played so much Risk when I was younger that really doesn't appeal to me anymore. And that matters to me as well. I like to try out new experiences, not rehash old ones over and over again. So that plays a factor as well. And then there's the factor of complexity. Mage Knight is way too complex for what I care for in a fantasy game. Some themes are just too serious for me, like the Freedom, the Underground Railroad. Even when I read books or watch movies, I typically go to escapism, to genre type material, not so much real life. So that plays a factor as well. Not a big fan of superheroes, so Legendary would not rank very high, nor History, like Orleans. I've played it once, and it was not for me. It's a fine game. It's a actually a great game for those people who look for strategy and Euro mechanisms. I'm just not that person. The same with Arc Nova, the big hit of the Dice Tower for 2021, I want to say, or 2020. and got a lot of good public reception. But to me, the idea of running a zoo and doing it with so many mechanisms just has no appeal whatsoever. And I might cover some of these games, especially games that I like, but also sometimes games that I don't like, and explain why I don't like them. New games that come out that apparently have great mechanisms in there, or great strategy, great competitive play, but I am looking for experiences that really immerse you into the theme. Like the Battle of Five Armies here is a great immersive theme, like the Battles of Westeros, but it's kind of a competitive, well, it's not kind of, it's a very competitive game. And these kind of games, then you kind of lose sight of the theme and the immersion, and you really get into the strategy and trying to win it from the other person. So when I judge games, like everyone judges games, then I kind of look at whether a game is so mechanically heavy or so involved with the mechanisms and the strategy and the tactics that you don't really get to enjoy imagining being in that world, or you look at the art but you look right over it, or you have no interest in reading the narrative because you're so focused on winning the game. Those are the kind of games that score generally lower on my list. Gaia Project, for instance, super heavy game. I had a game called Gaia, and I said I really enjoyed it until I met a group of people who said, "Oh, Gaia Project, you really like it? Let's meet up." And it turned out that I had no taste for Gaia Project. Gaia, however, was a very simple family game, which I did like. And these things do actually matter when you play a game. I find that you often lose the theme after a while and you start focusing on mechanisms if they're quite heavy. And then there are other games that we'll see in the third part of our top 1500, but I won't jump ahead just yet. So, no spoilers. But there are games there that are really, really simple, and people would never even think of trying them. Now, mind you, some games can also become too simple and water down the experience that you may have. So, it's a fine balance between complexity and theme that really matters on these lists. And so, yeah, I keep on saying this over and over again, that there are so many reasons why people like the games that they do. And quite often they are mechanically bound, or they are great puzzles to solve, or people just like the themes. And this is all nice, but I am looking for a slightly different angle for my games. I like to see games as reading books plus, or watching a movie deluxe. Like, it's, you get into the story of it all, the story that the designer or the creator created, adding your own aspects to it and building upon it, coming up with your own emergent story, if you will, but not just relying on your own emergent story to carry the game. Because often a lot of games say that there is story in it, but they just expect you, the player, to come up with the story. I take this for a given. I think that every game has that potential of coming up with a story through the players. But like Welcome to, for instance, that's a purely mechanical game. There is no emergent story that you're going to come up with other than I'm a realtor. So sometimes that's also not true. I do believe, however, that unless it's a party game like Wavelength, or activity like Fold It, or Six Nimt, that if it is a game that has somewhat of a theme or somewhat of a narrative, that helps a long way to nurture your own emergent storytelling and to build upon what there already is. And it's that sort of symbiosis between what the designer comes up with, not just mechanically, but also thematically, and what then the players do with those mechanics strategically, but also thematically, again, come up with their own emergent stories, that really completes a game. And that for me is then an excellent game if it does that. I'll extensively go into this during a DM masterclass, but just looking at the games that are so low on this list, I could confidently say that the balance between mechanism design and thematic design is not perfected to a degree that establishes a good platform for players to come up with their own emergent stories. Lagranja, Druids, Osiris, Beyond the Sun, San Juan We're really getting into like the older Euro games here, and so a lot of party games and abstract games. And these games just don't lend themselves to, or not as well, I should say. They don't completely not lend themselves to, but they don't do it as well as more thematic games. So yeah, Puerto Rico, that's a number two for me. That's definitely not highly rated, and if that shocks people, then I do apologize. But this channel is probably then also not for you. So now that we've had the number twos, we're going into the final lowest tier, the number ones. And no one in their right mind would give a game a number one rating on BGG. But for me, it's, yeah, no, just no. I look at this game and immediately I'm turned off. I'm just not interested. And that's just me. I am one person. There are legions of people out there who are fans of maybe the next following games. And we're going to go through them even more quicker than the previous games. So let's have a look. Control. I know that people like Letter Jam, very popular game. Shakespeare is in there. The Resistance. So you may find these games really fun and the experience is worthwhile, and I disagree with everything I say, and that's okay. My job is not to insult you by putting these games so low on my list. This is a knee jerk reaction list based on the story experience that I think these games deliver. So please don't take insult. But I do think it's important to see these games and basically gauge for yourself whether or not Story Tiles moving forward is going to be the channel for you. So this is a good primer in that respect. Pret-a-porter. I have no interest in clothing in a game. Dollars and donuts. I'd rather eat donuts than play a game about them. Diamonds. No. Lawyer Up is about law. Not that interesting for me in a game. Fantastic Factories, manufacturing, Blitzkrieg War. These themes do not appeal to me to spend my free time on in a game. And before you think, okay, but he only likes fantasy, that also is not true. I do like a lot of genres, but it's generally more aimed towards fiction rather than more realistic themes. But it's more than themes. Like I said earlier, it's also the balance between mechanisms and story. It's about symbiosis, the experience that you get as a gamer and can contribute to. And this kind of brings us to the final few games on my list. And there are many, many more games, of course, in BGG listed that I have not covered in this list, and you will maybe also not see in the final part three of the top 1500. We will just have to tune in to see what that means. In the meantime, feel free to leave a comment below if you do think that I did a particular game injustice. There are many games, like I said, that I have not played. So, yeah, feel free to change my mind about these things. I want to open a discussion about what it means to have experiential games in our hobby and not maybe focus so much on just mechanics or just theme, but the overall experience. I hope this didn't leave too much of a downer on you. This is definitely the darker Act 2 middle part of the list. I did this on purpose because I want to end on a high note with the top 1,500 games and show you which games, which 100 and I want to say roughly 120 games I do consider top material for this channel. And yeah, I hope that you will tune in next time to see what the top of the crop is. Shh. Dun, dun, dun.